Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Roundtable. Thanks so much for joining us live. If you'd like to participate in the discussion as well, make sure to go to presdy.com/live and log yourself into our chat box below the video. Once you're in the chat, please answer the following question just to make sure that everyone's online and can participate. And the question is, how do you feel about PR measurement in just one word? I'm looking forward to looking at those answers. And now for our guest, who I don't think needs a lot of introduction, but let's start the list. So, managing partner at Karma, worked on PR measurement at Metrica, Gorkana, and Prime Research, board director of AMEC, and so on and so on. Welcome to the show, Richard Bagnall. How are you?
Hello, I'm all right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's great. So, yeah, setting the scene, I've made kind of a whole list of stuff that you've all been involved in or still involved are. And I've kind of read, and I applaud, I motivate everyone to do that. Your post on being 25 years into the industry, the PR management industry. But my question is, and you kind of answered it in there, why are you so obsessed with measurement, and how did you get into it?
Well, yeah, there's always a story, isn't there, behind everything. First of all, thank you everyone for having me, and thank you to Presley for inviting me on. Always a pleasure to have a chance to talk about measurement. Look, I began my career in telesales, kind of in the media, commission only, didn't enjoy it. Was lucky to get to work at Hollis Press and Public Relations Annual. This is before the internet. This was a big, thick directory of all the PR and media contacts that used to basically be on every PR person's desk. I really enjoyed that job. It was great fun, but I wanted more. I was still selling, and I got an opportunity to get into PR, and so I jumped ship from sales. I went to work for a PR agency. It was called the Roland Company, owned by Saatchi and Saatchi. I worked there for a year and a half or so, and then I went in-house for a bit, and I worked there, and I just there was something not right. I wasn't really enjoying it, and I saw an advert for a company called Metrica, which said the world's fastest growing measurement business is seeking a business development manager. And I thought, well, this is great. It allows me to stay close to the PR industry, and I can use my sales skills as well. And I think I'm going to enjoy that job more. I had an interview with the founder. We had 3 pints of beer. It seemed like it was going to be a lot of fun. We were in Covent Garden. And without really thinking about it, I took the job. Turned up on day one. I realized that all the young, vibrant people that were in the office, who I thought would be my colleagues, were actually a sister company that was a PR agency. And Metrica was fast growing because we were tiny. It was basically just Mark and a graduate recruit who was doing a bit of Excel data input. And my salary was more than a third of our total income. And I just thought, my God, I'm really going to have to hit the ground running and really do well here in this job. And I sat on my first day, and the founder started talking to me about some of the nuances of measurement. And I remember starting to feel this overarching sense of panic overwhelm me. And like, oh my God, what have I done? I'm a PR guy. I don't understand measurement. And I've actually got to sell it. And it was at that point I thought, well, I'm either going to sink or swim. And if I'm going to swim, then I'm going to have to make this relevant and meaningful to PR and comms professionals, because there's just too much tendency in the measurement industry to overcomplicate things and make stuff seem impenetrable, where actually measurement should be easy to understand. It shouldn't be something that's feared. It should be something that we all embrace and we all do. And I think where I've been lucky is I was able to take what people see as complex and difficult to understand, and this is a really rather nuanced thing, and bring that sort of human face to it and boil it down, make it more digestible. And I've been surrounded by some incredible smart people in my life as well. I was lucky to meet them, the founder, Mark, this graduate recruit, Paul Hender. He to this day still works with me. We're nearly 27 years on. I think Paul has actually been in the industry 27 years now. And Paul is brilliant at data and the real guts of analysis, proper data scientist. Whereas I'm more of a more of a, I guess, I'm a PR guy who just got into measurement, right place, right time. And I specialize in making it digestible. So that's how I got into it. And that's how I'm
cool. But isn't that panicky feeling? I sometimes get a sense that like customers that sign up for Presley right now and have a conversation, they still get that sometimes. Isn't that like 25 years on? It's still a thing that people are all of a sudden need to start reporting on data, and they've been in the business for so long, and they kind of get that same feeling as you had like 25 years ago. So but just to kind of frame that a little bit, where like how far have we come like during those 25 years? Of course things improved, right? And I think especially the last 5 years we've kind of saw things improving, but how far have we improved, and what's still to come according to you?
There's no holy grail to come.
No.
There's no metric that the industry's been waiting for that just can't be created, and if we could just have this one number, it would fix all our problems. There's no suite or tool that we're waiting for that doesn't exist. If that could just be invented, it would solve all of our problems. It's literally a question of having to do the hard work. No one likes to do more work than they feel they have to, and also no one likes to feel that they're being measured. I still have the fear when I think about having to go and have a chat with my dad when my school reports came in. None of us like being measured, and if we think of it as sort of some kind of measurement of our work, it's going to immediately put our defenses up, and we need to just change the way we think about this. One of my key messages at the moment is, more than ever, we live in the era of accountability. I mean, I think for the last sort of 14 years since the financial crash, it's always felt hard. And it's, then with the last 2 years of the pandemic, it's just felt even harder than ever, hasn't it? And obviously at this point, I'd say I hope everyone is doing as well as they can in the circumstances. But in these difficult financial eras, it means that all budgets the world over are under more scrutiny than ever. And what the CFO is looking for is for PR and comms professionals to prove their value. How do you prove your value? You prove your value by being able to demonstrate that you have supported the organization that you work for against some of its key objectives. Now, if we only come to think about proving our value and measuring our work after we've done it, if we've done the work without having thought through properly why are we doing this and how does that support our organization, if we then rely on some metrics that some tool has produced that we haven't thought about and produce some charts and dashboards, and just hope that they somehow will answer the questions to our boss, we've got a problem. If we can lean into it, though, spend some time thinking about what we're trying to do, those objectives, the plan, then do some meaningful activity and then measure that in a meaningful way, you actually get a measurement story that makes sense, that you can understand, that you can engage with, and you can embrace, and that fear falls away.
And all of a sudden it basically starts actually guiding you as well, I suppose, because that's the first step, right? If it's just for the stakeholders that you kind of like collecting that data, I don't think it will ever be successful. It's only when it starts guiding you to become better at whatever you're trying to achieve. I guess that's kind of a measure as well. Do you see like a difference in between those, I don't know, like strategic goals or strategic kind of things that you measure, or stuff that you really need to report on? When do you feel a metric is really successful? What's kind of, for me, like, because you, of course, as a founder or people who run a software business, you're driven by metrics as well, pretty heavily. And the best metrics that worked for us were metrics that are actionable, stuff we can kind of do something with, where we can make evaluations of and start changing strategy a little bit. Do you think that's a valuable thing in a metric, or does that go further?
Well, I think that's critical, but there's sort of two needs for measurement, aren't there? There's measurement to prove what you've done and demonstrate what you've done, which is sort of backward looking. We did this campaign and this happened. And then there's measurement and evaluation that informs strategy. The perfect measurement program should be able to do both. Of course, this word that is used in our industry so much at the moment, insight, I want real insight, is all about giving me actionable information that I can use to used to drive my strategy. My belief is that it is frequently used incorrectly by people because, sadly, the vast majority of the PR industry still wants to just count past activity and still wants, and I call that basically tactical measurement. It's measurement of activity, not measurement demonstrating value, which is the more strategic stuff. But I would say 80% of the industry is still at that sort of tactical, backward-looking measurement, just counting some big numbers, and only the enlightened 10 or 20% are looking for stuff that really does help them with their strategy, and then really embrace it as well, because that's the key thing. You've got to then say, okay, well, look, what have we learned from this, and how are we going to embrace it, and what are we going to do different? And that takes courage. That takes forward thinking people. Now, the good news is that those are the people who are going to succeed in their careers, and it isn't as difficult as it should seem. And I'm smiling a bit because I've seen Rachel Roberts has appeared. This year's CIPR president, a very old and dear friend of mine. And Rachel, you're absolutely one of the smartest people in PR, I think you want me to say. But Rachel's this year's CIPR president and was a very early client of mine when she was at Yellow Pages back in the early days of Metrica. So hi to you, Rachel.
Hey, and thanks for participating in the chat as well. So, but diving in a little bit deeper into those 20%, and I'm curious, very practically, what are examples of what they're doing versus that the 80% are not doing that makes them part of the more future successful PR people?
So the 80% are prepared to buy a tool or a platform, a dashboard, a service potentially, but mainly they're software-driven platforms now. That because they're software as a service, they're a SaaS product. They're built once to be sold many times, and that limits by default a lot of what they are able to do in terms of tailoring stuff to individual clients. So they're based on APIs from different data feeds, and they count different numbers that are accessible, and those numbers are then interrogated and turned into a variety of different charts and dashboards, and those numbers will be the quantitative numbers largely. So they'll be the volume of coverage, number of tweets, impressions, it's all that type of stuff, region, whatever it might be, lists and tables turned into charts. And that's what we call the counting what's easy to count.
Yes.
The people who want stuff that's strategic are the people who want to get a report, and the report should tell them what's happened, now what, what, so what, well, what does this actually mean for us? Yes. And then now what, well, what are we going to do about it? And to get to those kind of measurements, it's about more than just counting different digital and traditional media metrics. It's about understanding what your PR and comm strategy is. What was it that you were trying to achieve? And measuring it in a meaningful way. Now, that probably means measuring beyond the media content. Media content is like a breadcrumb. Most of the media content, of course, is now digital.
Yes.
So think of it as a digital breadcrumb that leads to the activity that you have hopefully generated. And we want that activity because none of our bosses or clients want to employ us to do stuff. No. They don't want us to be a busy fool just doing activity. I always think of it, with my sales background, I think of it as if any of us employed a salesman, salesperson, and we how would we measure their success? What we wouldn't do is measure their success on the amount of mail shots they sent out or the amount of telephone calls that they made, because that's activity. So a salesperson can be making 100 phone calls a day. They could be sending out 1,000 emails a week and mail shots in the post. But if no one's signing up, all they are is a cost and not a benefit to your business, and would very quickly fire that salesperson. And I think we have to think of it in the same way for PR. If all we're doing is measuring our activity, the stuff that we're doing, and we aren't able to link it through to the value that we create, the benefit that we bring to our organization, then we are also just busy fools, and we are also just a cost. And we don't want to be busy fools. We want to be value creators. So to get there, we have to have the conversation up front with our bosses, with our clients, whoever it might be, to understand what value is to them. What does value look like from the PR function to those people? And we have that conversation up front in advance. And by the way, when you do that, you can push back on things that are unreasonable. You can have a sensible conversation about what success looks like. And if your boss or your client has got unreasonable, ridiculous expectations, you can explain at that point why he or she is incorrect. We're on the back foot in cricket parlance after we've done the work. If we then produce a report with the wrong metrics, the boss starts asking us questions about, well, what value have you created? You say, well, I've done this activity. The boss says, so what? What have you actually done for me? And then perhaps the boss says something unreasonable. You can't then defend your position. You've left it too late. So we have to bring measurement forward to the beginning. It's part of the planning process. It's part of the strategy. And I know that in a previous episode, you've had Ginny Dietrich talking about the importance of planning, and Laura Sutherland as well. And it's why at AMEC, where I've chaired the association for the last 6 years, our big initiative last year, we tend to bring out a big educational initiative each year. Last year, it was all about the importance of planning PR and comms in a meaningful way. And you might say, well, why would a trade association that's there to educate about measurement be trying to educate about planning? And it's because the two things are inextricably linked.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I keep kind of coming back to those 80-20%, because I think it's a goal of a lot of kind of listeners or kind of viewers, or maybe just people starting out, to become part of that 20%. And I think we all hope that 20% increases to 50, 60, 70%, right? So coming a little bit back to that, is it a simplified thing for me to say that instead of using those like coverage reports or dashboards as output, to start using them as an input to kind of like deliver more output? Or is that too simplified? What I'm trying to aim at is that a lot of people see those reports as kind of an end result, right? So they make the coverage report or whatever it is with all the metrics in it, and done. My work is done now. Move on to the next campaign. Should we kind of try and have the process start there and kind of like, or is that too simplified?
No, you're absolutely right. I think you've nailed it. So part of the issue is sort of the legacy of how this stuff worked, right? So I mentioned Metrica 25, 26 years ago when we got going. Back in those days, you had media monitoring companies, like, those of us on the call might remember Remike and Curtis and Durrant. Yes. They were the big monitoring companies. And we'd, me in my old PR job, I'd shake out clips of paper-based clips, would fall out of an envelope. My job was to stick them onto an A4 piece of paper and photocopy them and send them off to our clients. So that's where it began. And then there were measurement companies that did the measurement. And in the very early days, the monitoring companies sent the measurement companies the clips. We measured, they monitored. Yep. And we'd send Rachel at Yellow Pages a report a month after the coverage had come out. And the industry's just moved on so much now. But those reports, the only really way that you could easily, in that sort of old analog world, get any kind of information was to look at the media content only. Yeah. And that sufficed in the early days of measurement. Today, it doesn't suffice. The media content is what we call in the industry the outputs.
Yes.
What we have to do is there's three core components that I'd like everyone to think about. There's outputs, outtakes, and outcomes. And what we have to do is move our measurement from just outputs to say, well, what are the outtakes and what are the outcomes? So what do I mean by outtakes and outcomes? Well, outputs is all the media content, broadcast, social, digital, all the stuff that we've created. Then it gets seen by audiences. and they read it, and most people don't read beyond headlines of articles now on digital content. They don't read beyond the picture. It's why we have such shock headlines and shock pictures. But they read it, they digest it, they listen to it, and then they think about it. And that's what we call the outtakes. If you want it in nice, simple sort of terminology and way of thinking about it, the outtakes is what people now think, having seen, watched, and heard and listened to the content that you've generated. And that's where the reputation and the awareness and those type of metrics sit. And then moving on beyond there, we have the outcome metrics. And those outcome metrics are, well, what did you actually do as a result? So you've seen the content, the output metrics, you've thought about it, the outtake metrics, and then what have you done, the outcome metrics. And to your point, Jesse, what you were talking about was, well, look, should we see this media content analysis as the beginning of the process? Yes, because that's the outputs. What we need to do is now keep measuring the outputs because they matter. Those are the breadcrumbs. But what are the outtakes that our audiences have thought about? And then what are the outcomes? What have they now done as a result of this? So the outputs, outtakes, and outcomes. And if we can pull those three things together, then we can talk a meaningful measurement story that shows organizational value and demonstrates the impact of our work, which we all know, how critically important PR and comms is, and what a powerful weapon it is when used appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, makes a lot of sense. But if you then see that, like, as an industry that we're still struggling with kind of like getting a grip with us, and then we of course kind of sometimes, I don't know, not jealously look at marketing and basically isn't that a big problem that with marketing and Facebook ads and digital ads specifically, you can kind of measure the exact outcome. Like when you set up a Facebook ad, for example, you can select, do you want to generate the lead? Do you want to generate the sale? Do you want to generate the download? So basically you can kind of measure the outcome. In our industry, it's harder because the outcome can be so different, right? It can be like a download, can hopefully be a sale at some point as well. But is that a little bit the problem why we're struggling with it? That these things are not like just to pinpoint, it's this that we want, or a public opinion that we want to change. It's much harder to measure, right? Is that one of the issues that we're facing?
Yeah, because people don't want to spend the time thinking about it is part of the problem. I mean, look, was building the Westminster Cathedral in the days that it was built, was that hard? Yes. Was it worth it? Yes. Is anything in life worth doing easy?
No.
And most things require hard work. Most things that have proper value, that are meaningful do. So first of all, it's not easy, and I do acknowledge that. Secondly, I would take issue with what you said about, you're absolutely right, that we do look jealously at marketing and advertising, and we think they've all got it sorted, but they haven't.
No,
that's
they haven't.
Nonsense. They think they have it all sorted because they've got last click attribution, but you can rest assured that someone who's bought some product because on Amazon hasn't just gone there through a measurement journey that only exists within the Amazon platform, or likewise on Facebook, or likewise on Instagram. It's come about through a variety of different touch points that are highly likely to have included a whole load of the reputational ones that PR drives and supports. And so how do we get to a meaningful measurement of that? Well, like most things in this industry, the answer is it depends. You can do market mix modeling, you can do econometrics. They're very complicated. There's multiple different models. There's multiple different vendors who offer them. Most of them are very expensive. And I know, because I know some of the senior people at these companies, they're all very polite and charming on the public stage. But when you have a beer with them, they all go, well, actually, there's a flaw in our model and there's a flaw in this. They all know that the model's flawed. Why? Because humans are complex. Why I do something is always going to be slightly different why you do it. And it's always going to be something slightly different from why our viewers and listeners today might do something, and there's multiple touch points and variables. Some tragedy could happen on the day that you're launching your campaign. It could be baking hot. Some happy news could happen, that could derail your activity. But humans are also just very different. So what do I advise people to do? First of all, if you're in a corporate, if you're in-house, if you're in a charity, not-for-profit, find out whether an econometric model exists in your organization, because rather terrifyingly, in a lot of organizations they do, and the PR and comms department has no idea that they do. Now, the worry about that is that the way these models work is that they take every input, so every sort of activity that could have led to the outcome, whether that's sales, promotion, advertising, marketing, whatever. If you're selling ice cream, it will include the weather and the day of the week and all of this kind of stuff. They take all of the different inputs and they factor and they work it out and they apply scores against it, and they then attribute each one as how much of the outcome, the sales numbers, it's generated, which is all well and good, except that if you forget to include an input, it gets zero attribution. So the input that often gets forgotten is PR. And I remember once working with a massive charity in the UK, and the head of comms phoned me up in a right old panic. But she said, "Richard, I've just discovered this econometric model's going on." And I won't name them, but this is a huge charity that we all know. And they run multiple events throughout the year, and one particularly big one. She had a team of over 100 PR people. And just on this one particular big month, events month, there was a little bit of the peak in the donations that said PR stunts. So her board were getting this report that attributed the work of 127 people against some tiny little uplift of sales in the 1 month listed as PR stunts, which of course was complete nonsense. And the reason was that there was no PR data going into her econometric model. And so we created a feed of PR data for her, and we're able to help her with that situation. But there may well be econometrics going on in your organization, and if there's no PR number going in, then you're getting no effect attributed against you coming out. So find out if that exists. If it doesn't exist, then the best way of measuring, you don't have to go to the expense and complication of doing econometric modeling. What you have to do is tell a meaningful measurement story. How do you do that? You say, here is the challenge. This is what the organization wants me to do. This is the sales in that case that I need to support. What are the sales looking like at the moment? What are the visits to the website looking like? Whatever it is, whether it's a in-person sale or an online sale. Right, I'm going to do this activity. I'm going to measure it in terms of the outputs, the content, the audience that it reached, what it said, the quality of the content, etc., etc. Then I'm going to understand what people now think. Then I'm going to understand what they've now done on our website. Then I'm going to pull these data points together, the outputs, the outtakes, and the outcomes, and I'm going to link them and say, look, here was the challenge. We needed to lift sales. We did this. We exposed this many people. Awareness went from here to there. The net promoter score went from here to there. This drove activity. We supported it. You needed some integrated measurement, by the way. So we supported it with some digital advertising. And as a result, we saw an uplift of sales from X to Y. Now, we can't claim that every sale was a direct result, but this is part of an integrated campaign because nobody does anything in silos anymore, apart from try and measure and claim effect. So,
No, exactly. And I think we, like last summer, we had Rand Fishkin on from Spark Thorough, and he's been around the block for a while, and he wrote a really interesting piece about digital advertising. And I can tell, like looking like inward as well, we've kind of seen the same thing, right? Like we've recently just kind of, and then he talks about the story that Airbnb at one point just put off all their Google ads, right? And it didn't saw a decrease, right?
That's right.
Because instead of people just clicking the ad at the top, they just went down and do the results and clicked the same thing. So so I think it was a combination of the branding, about PR, about everything going
reputation, awareness, all that stuff. Absolutely. And they are one of a number of examples, aren't they? Unilever, Procter & Gamble.
Yes.
And that's because we haven't even gone here, but in digital media, there are so many metrics that just are basically meaningless. They're easy to cheat. They're easy to gain. They're massive spam farms, bot farms, ad fraud farms, stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from corporations they think that they're exposing their content to target audiences and that target audiences are engaging with it, but they're not. And that's, a lot of people think that engagement metrics are perhaps, a good place to end up at. And I would say they're still not, because they're easy to be cheated. I can't remember off the top of my head now what the stat is, but a significant proportion of us will retweet content that we haven't even read. So much so that Twitter will now warn you if it thinks you're doing it. But people still do it. So what kind of engagements there? So
no. It's indeed interesting to kind of like. I think we went too deep in that digital advertising, and we kind of were blinded by the success. But all of a sudden, people are starting to wake up and say, "Damn, it's costing a lot of money." That's one, right? It's not cheap anymore. Everyone's kind of competing against everyone, and there's just a few companies getting better from it. And second, it's not that as successful. And that's the reason why, and that's what Ran Fishkin in his blog post, which Kate can kind of link up, tells. They also own the measurement for their own ads, right? So like you pay them for ads, but at the same time you look at their data to kind of see how successful the ads are. So I think you need to watch out with that. And of course it has its value, but you need to watch out.
And we know they've been caught with their trousers down a number of times, right? What was it? Facebook was counting a view as 3 seconds. Of a piece of content. I mean, Google, by its own admission, was some research a few years ago. I used to talk about in the presentation. I think 58% of digital ads were produced in a format that you couldn't see on most screens. It was back in the days before everything became dynamic for mobiles, but it would sort of be shoved off over to the right hand side. It still counted as a display of your ad. So there's but that's the problem. If we just stick at output metrics, these are the numbers that are easy to count, but they don't really mean anything. We've got to move to the numbers. We've got to measure what matters, not just the stuff that's easy to count.
A question that came in from in advance from Vanessa and her team, and it is, can you explain share of voice and what it means? Is it necessary to use for PR measurement, or is it like an output measure again?
Hi Vanessa, thanks for your question. Share of voice is sort of what it says on the tin, really. It's normally shown in a pie chart. It shows you the percentage or the proportion of the coverage that's talking about you or your brand or your product in comparison to a set number of competitors or other brands. It's therefore it is the voice means share of the conversation. It can be measured in terms of volumes of content. It can be measured in terms of impressions. It can be measured in terms of social and digital content. But it's that share. Now all of those things are actually an output. So it is a share of output against competitors. It's very unlikely to include each and every one of your competitors. So I mean, there's an instant drawback with it. It does give you some kind of guide as to, who in theory is dominating the conversation, but it's not taking into account some of the qualitative metrics. So is it, you can dominate the conversation if you're an airline and your airplane just crashed, you're gonna have a huge share of voice, but you might not have wanted it. It could be talking about all kinds of issues. It could be talking about negative stuff. It also could be just very vanilla content, just sort of talking about, just mentioning you. But your competitors, when they get talked about, it's absolutely specifically talking about their products and how good their products are. So it's a metric I would always, I would guard against putting too much weight on it. It might be one that you want to put into some kind of balanced scorecard. I would see it as something that's there of interest. But always measurement is about, I would always do less, but do it better, get deeper into the content. Perhaps do one competitor that you aspire to and really understand what is the great content that they're doing that is generating, this coverage. And what is there stuff there that we can learn? Can we see from their tactics stuff that can inform our strategy?
So, something that we've been kind of trying, and I'm like, we try to simplify things as well. Like you can't do lots of things, and what I think is really important is not necessarily the number, but the movement of that number over time, right? I think that's often because people stare at the number and it doesn't mean anything, right? Because they look at that number, now what, they say.
That's right.
But then you start splitting this up month over month over month, and I think that's when it starts kind of ticking with me. So I really we just have literally an Excel with numbers in it, but they are drilled down month over month, and I think then they start giving you a story, and I think that's a simple thing. And maybe this is again too simple for you, Richard, but that kind of helped me make sense of how many organic traffic do you get? Okay, what could it mean that this increased, right? This month, what did we do differently? And I think that's something that has helped us, and it just simply starts with lines on an Excel, and that's where you start, and that helped us.
I don't think that's too simple at all, Jesse. I really like your point, and I agree with it entirely. I was actually talking to someone yesterday who was very keen for me to validate a new measurement approach he was taking to some broadcast PR, and he basically talked me through what he wanted to do. And effectively what he'd done was he'd come up with a way of scoring broadcast content to create a score. I think it went from 0 to 100. And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I think these things are good and these things are not so good. I said, of course, lots of people in their different systems create a score. The problem with the score is exactly what you said. You get a number. You got 68, Jesse. Now what am I going to do? What does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Also, by the way, is that score flawed? Answer, probably yes. There's a very famous statistician called George Box who famously says, all models are flawed, but some are useful. And I think that's always a good thing to remember. And why are they useful? Well, they're useful for exactly the reason you said. You can track over time. So if you're at 68, next month you're at 70, and the month after you're at 72, you are probably doing things better. If the numbers are going the other way, you're probably doing things better. If you have stocks and shares and the FTSE or the NASDAQ index goes up, it probably means that your portfolio has gone up. If the index goes down, it probably means your portfolio has gone down. But it doesn't necessarily. And it may be that the index has gone up and your personal wealth that day has gone down. And so proceed with caution on these scores, but as an indicator over time, I think they have a value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like moving on a little bit on the reporting of metrics, right? So we, for example, do this on a monthly basis. Some people do this on a project or campaign basis. Some people kind of have quarterly meetings around. I think how do you approach this? What do you think is a good way or a good rhythm to get into? I try to kind of force my team, for example, to look at it weekly, right? We have a stand-up, and then we kind of just take a quick look at monthly. We do a little bit of a bigger kind of report. We write it out. We see some next steps, some analytics. And to be honest, this isn't necessarily around PR. This is just kind of business metrics and so on. But how, what's your advice there? How should they start working with this internally or with their clients?
Yeah, I think a great point. I think it's all about the rhythm of your business and your organization and how frequently it's useful. I mean, one of the things, certainly in the sort of, in the teeth of the pandemic that I was talking about, was the need to speed up and slow down. The pandemic changed everything for all of us in terms of how quickly we had to respond to things, how quickly we had to be aware of things, how quickly things were changing on a daily basis. And that meant there was a need for, real-time information to inform the C-suite of what was going on. Even from an internal comms point of view, we had all our staff suddenly at home. You needed to check that they were okay. They were the frontline ambassadors under great pressure, all of this kind of stuff. There was you needed to speed up with your monitoring and the intelligence that you were getting, but you also needed to slow down a bit, to make sure that when you came to evaluate effectiveness, you were doing it in a meaningful way. Any plan that you had at the beginning of the pandemic was obsolete, because any benchmark number that you'd set or any aspiration that you'd set was meaningless, because the world had just changed in a way that none of us could possibly have imagined. From PR perspective, the behavior, hopes, fears, aspirations of all of our audiences had just completely changed. Their consumption of media had just totally changed. The times of day, the listening to radio in the day had suddenly gone shooting up. Their trust in different organizations changed. Their trust in the media changed. Their trust in politicians changed. It continues to
change,
particularly in the UK. But in the early days of the UK, the trust in our politicians went shooting up, because that's what happens in a crisis. You want to trust your leaders until they prove they can't be trusted, potentially, or maybe they can. Who knows? I'm not commenting. But yeah, so we needed to do new plans. So we needed to slow down and get that measurement right. Now, back in the old days, Rachel at Yellow Pages, I can't remember, they're either getting a monthly or a quarterly report, and a number of organizations still are on that rhythm. But of course, the world of media has sped up, social digital channels, we've got all this conversation going on around our conversation now in real time. You want to have that quick litmus test of what's being said now, but you need to measure it in a slow way too. And I think of the Roman god Janus, who sat, it's where the word January comes from. So he sat at the head of the year, and he had two faces. And one face looked to the future and the coming year, and the other face looked to the past. And I think that's how we should think about our measurement today. We should be you need to give your activity time to have an effect. An effect doesn't always happen instantly. So that measurement, you need that slow measurement, an accurate measurement, but you also need real-time insights as well. You need a blend of both.
I think that's something that we are kind of struggling with as well. How sensitive do you make your targets or numbers, right? And I think that's kind of a difficult decision often. You can't throw in the towel on a number too quickly, because it can be demotivating if it changes too slow, right? So for the team and internally. But secondly, you need to have enough input so you keep evolving and keep allowing you to kind of change direction if you see that it's not moving. How do you advise maybe your clients at Karma with these things, and is there kind of a good guide there to help people decide on metrics, or is it really maybe just get started with it and see what happens and then learn as you go?
So my friend and colleague Mark Wiener, he used to always say, begin simply, but simply begin. And I always thought that was a lovely quote of what people should do with a measurement program. The most important thing is to begin. Just get on with it. Don't try and overcomplicate it. Don't try and boil the ocean. Don't be overwhelmed. There's a million metrics you could have. I haven't yet said my favorite words in the measurement space in answer to one of your questions, which is it depends. How you measure is always going to depend on where you are on your measurement journey. Incidentally, at AMEC, we have a free resource called the Measurement Maturity Mapper, which I'm sure will be posted into the chat. It's all about, it's at amecorg.com/M3 is where you'll find it. And it's all about, it's a diagnostic tool that allows you to, it asks you about 50 questions, and it allows you to work out where you are in terms of the maturity of how well you're measuring. And then it gives you a scorecard itself, and it says, look, this is what you're doing well. This is where you could do better. And the areas where you could do better, this is the type of things that you should be considering to elevate your measurement to the next level. It's a fabulous tool. You can benchmark yourself either against the entire database of people that have ever answered it, in terms of, it's all anonymized, but it scores different dimensions for you. Or you can choose by country, by region, by vertical sector, by industry, trade association, etc. But look, measurement is always going to depend. So, be patient, choose the right metrics by asking the right questions as well. And the big tip with asking the right questions is to ask why. Like those of us who are parents,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
There's a reason that if you ask a question about 3 times, you actually get to the heart of the problem of why people actually want something. So don't be afraid to ask why as well.
No. And we can almost go to the Q&A. Some great questions came in. And I also see that Janice is actually in the chat. He's one of our clients. So that's fun. His name is Janice. So that's good. We've got the gods here.
But Janice, no, it's a U at the end.
Yeah. All right, good. So if you have some questions, there some already came in, and you feel free to put them in the chat, whether this is on LinkedIn or on YouTube or presley.com/live. I've got one question over here, which will bring up, which is here now. All right. Probably PR has recently released statistics on open rates and media pitches 3-4%. Doesn't this give us finally sobering evidence PR's role in the distribution of this mismanaged info? I'm not sure you want to give a go here.
Sorry, something popped up on my screen, and things keep popping on my screen. What am I reading? This thing at the bottom here, Propel PR's.
Yes, that one. Yeah.
Overrated media pitches.
Yeah. I'll go into this because we've kind of got some data on this as well first, and then you can I think we see tons higher open rate. On average, we see between 35 and 45% in our campaigns. It's definitely more. So the number of 3-4% open rate is very low in our mentions. I think what we've always consistently been seeing in media pitches and open rates is that we've been consistently performing what we see in MailChimp statistics on marketing. Of course, this is just an output metric, right? It doesn't mean anything if someone opens your email and then just kind of removes it. But at least you know that kind of it is being received, and you can kind of get started with this. But I think it really depends. But I'm not sure you can pitch in there, Richard.
I think that's your space, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you gave a good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, a question for Richard here. It comes up on the screen. So for agencies who are employing team members who are dedicated to planning and insights activity, how are they recruited? Very important here. I feel that we have to bring this skill set into the industry. I think she makes a good point here, right?
She does indeed, as always. Hi, Rachel. Yeah, look, you're right. And the big agencies are doing that. They've got planning directors, planning teams. Shout out to Gemma Maroney, who wrote the original AMEC white paper on planning. It's another fabulous resource. You'll find it on AMEC's website at amecorg.com. I think, and this is a gut feel, that the industry is perhaps getting to a bit of a tipping point where some people with these skills do exist within the industry now.
Yeah.
And you could probably recruit them by our age-old friend of getting into a price war to tempt people out of a job and join your agency, or a work-life balance benefits package. But there aren't enough. And the main point here is the industry needs to take this stuff more seriously. You need. I remember talking to one of Rachel, as I mentioned, is this year's CIPR president. I remember talking to a CIPR president probably 10 years ago. And I'm not going to tell you who it was. We were in a private meeting. There's about 10 of us, and it was a Chatham House rule. So it was confidential.
Yeah.
It was very senior PR and comms people. And I remember this lady in frustration throwing up her hand, saying to us all in this room, let's face it, PR's biggest, dirtiest secret is it doesn't plan properly. And it really struck me. And it was at that point I realized this explains why people don't measure properly. So if you don't have a plan, you don't measure. And a plan is not tactics. A plan is not, I'm going to send out this 4 press releases to all these journalists and blanket spray the media with content. A plan is not, I'm going to float a duck down the River Thames. A plan is that my organization has this challenge. PR and comms is going to support it by doing, we're going to reach these people. This is our key target audience. These are the resources that we've got. This is the level of awareness and the level of appetite for our service they already have. doing that background work. I'm now on my strategy. I want to, move this needle from here to there. My tactics, therefore, actually floating a rubber duck down the Thames is the right thing to do. So I am going to do that, but I'm then going to do this media activity, and I'm going to measure the outtakes and the outcomes, and I'm going to bring it all together. That's a proper integrated plan, and that is what matters so much. If we don't have a plan, we're not going to measure. We're just going to count nonsense, and we're going to risk becoming obsolete as PR professionals. We've got to move, as you said, Jesse, from that 80 to 20% of the enlightened people.
Yeah, and isn't there a danger that you bring on like a measurement guy or girl, right? Instead of really kind of making it part of everyone's thinking. And I think that's kind of a danger that you say, let's chat with the measurement guy. Did you just bring him in at that level, and then he comes in, he says his things, and then he goes away again? I think that's a problem as well.
You're absolutely right. What's stopping any of us being the measurement guy? I am the measurement guy. But
you are the absolute measurement guy.
Okay, so here is my dirty secret, which I mentioned just before we came live, because I know somebody wanted me to answer this question, which was, can Richard tell us how to make a pivot table? Here's my dirty secret, team. I am crap at Excel. Okay, I can just about build a list that can add up a row of numbers in Excel. I can read a spreadsheet and understand it, but I can't make it.
No.
I can't write a decent query in it. I'm lucky that I have people around me that can. So I'm a comms guy, I'm a PR guy, and like all of us. So if I can understand how to measure without understanding how to use Excel, so can all of us. So that's my rallying cry to us. We don't have to be able to use Excel and data and get in the weeds ourselves, but we have to understand the concept. So if we have a measurement guy, then perhaps that measurement guy's job is to be an Excel wizard and to be directed by us, but it's not to do all the measurement thinking for us. We have to lean in as an industry, understand the concepts. They're not simple. They're not difficult. It's not changed in the 6 years I've been in this industry as a measurement person. It's, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get the right message to the right people at the right time to achieve some form of outcome. That's always been what it's about. We've just got more routes to those audiences, but we've got to focus on our audience. We've got to focus on the quality, the message that we're wanting them to understand, and our perspective, if you like. Obviously try and do it at the right way and appropriately, and we're doing it for a reason, which is we want some kind of outcome, whatever that outcome might be. And if we think it through like that, it really isn't too difficult.
Cool. So we've got time for one more from Phil here. What's your take on measurement and evaluation in the social space when so many things are out of control? For example, when networks change their algorithms, that of course something that we don't have under control. What's your take on that?
Hi, Phil. Thanks for your question. Look, I completely agree with you. It's why output metrics on their own are losing their meaning. They're changing their algorithms because they've been busted. Because, for the reason I said earlier, Facebook, got caught claiming that a video view was 3 seconds. That they're basically large numbers of it were just meaningless that they were producing. So they changed their algorithms on the way they measure. They changed their algorithms on what they produce in the APIs, what they let companies take. One big point I'd make to you about social channels is most social media platforms, if you look at it, it will tell you that the vast majority of content is on Twitter. And I challenge any one of you to go and look at your social platform, and you'll see that it says Twitter is the dominant voice. Yet in terms of size of audience, I think Twitter's the 8th or 9th biggest platform. It's completely dwarfed by Insta, by TikTok, even TikTok, right? The new kid on the block and other channels. And yet your social media platform will tell you it's where most conversations happening. Why? Because the API for Twitter is the easiest one for them to get hold of. It's nothing to do with the reality. So at Karma, we specialize in actually focusing in on the content that matters, that's being seen by the people that matters, and actually getting humans to go into these platforms to get meaningful information out for our clients. Because if you just rely on these tools to put out content, to Phil's point here, they change things, they block things, and you're just a hostage to all those fortunes, and you're basically getting meaningless data.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. So if viewers want to hear more about your exploits, where can they find you online? So we'll definitely add the link. So
thank you. Well, I'm on Twitter at Richard Bagnall. I'm on LinkedIn. Surprise, surprise, Richard Bagnall. My day job that I'm grateful to have is I'm the co-managing partner of Karma. Karma is a global media monitoring communications evaluation business. We work with organizations around the world. You'll find me there, richard.bagnall@karma.com. Cool. I've got a couple of, I always think people like to sort of have a case study or something like that to take away. A couple of things I wanted to just highlight. Karma did a report on using, rather than just counting easy stuff, looking at some meaningful metrics around outputs to outcomes, if you like, around the vaccine rollout around the world. So we looked at all the major vaccine manufacturers. We measured across 12 different countries around the world. And we measured and measured from when there was first proof of efficacy. And I can still remember that morning in my shower, hearing the news that, there'd been good news that the vaccines worked. And I remember feeling like, everything was great. And of course, we measured and monitored for the next 4 months. And it had a lot of peaks and troughs with people, the vaccine deniers and skeptics and all the rest of it. And we measured across different markets, and we looked at the ultimate outcome, which was how quickly people were prepared to put the needle in their arm. And it's got some fascinating stuff. France and Germany, Mr. Macron, Mrs. Merkel, had said some pretty confusing information and frankly not true information about the AstraZeneca vaccine, which fed through to people having fears, which you could see by doing some primary research, doing some research online, what we call the outtakes, and then through to the outcomes. There was one point in France where I can't remember the number now, but something like 60% of their vaccine stock that they'd bought was sitting in fridges because people didn't want to put it in their arms. They didn't trust it because of the way their leaders had communicated. It's the ultimate output to outtake to outcome story. And you can download the report, but you can also see a webinar, which we did with Number 10, so the UK government's COVID response team. And if I give you the URL for that, that's at karma.com/vaccine-webinar. And you'll get you'll be able to watch that webinar we did with Number 10, and you'll be able to get the link to download the report if you're interested.
We'll follow up with an email to anyone who's joined or signed up at least, and kind of send all the details and links in there. But thanks so much, Richard, for the advice and answers. As always, they were awesome, and I have a feeling that a lot of viewers made tons of notes. And as a thank you, we kind of have a tradition here with our guests, is that we send them either Belgian chocolates or Belgian beers. So I'm checking, what would be your favorite?
Well, my wife is downstairs and she can't hear me. She would say chocolate, but I say beer. Beer, please.
Okay. Beer, Belgian beer is coming your way.
That's super kind. Thank you so much.
No. All right, good. So to wrap up, we'll be sending a summary of this episode to everyone together with the recording in the next few days. So if you'd like to reread some of the answers or share it with some colleagues, please do. Also, we've got our next roundtable already planned. It will with a global expert in telling brand stories and former journalist Melanie Diesel on February 24th. You can register on the link Kate will be sharing in the chat right now. That's it. Thanks again, Richard, and thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye-bye.
It's a real pleasure. Bye-bye.